Well, good morning, my friend, and welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. Good to have you with me on this Thursday morning, a rainy day here in the Oklahoma City area, and looking forward to what the Lord's going to do today as we have another busy day to serve the Lord. Good service last night. We talked about the New Jerusalem coming down, and that was a good service. One more week in the series on the end times, and then we'll get into another series. And I would encourage you to be faithful to everything going on. Now, this weekend, of course, our campaign here is over, and let's not let up, church. Let's be faithful. Let's be in our place. Easter's over, but God's not over. And if all you are is an Easter appearing type of Christian, you're a very poor Christian. You ought to be in church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And those who say they don't see the need of it, they're just showing the reason why they say that is because they're very fleshly. Only flesh with people see. The closer you get to God, the more you realize the more I need God and the more I need to be in church, the more I need from God. And so I'd encourage you, be faithful to church wherever you are. Let's see what God can do through us. Well, today I want to just talk to you from Titus chapter 1, verse 8. The scripture says, but a lover, he says, but a lover of hospitality, a lover of good men, sober, just, holy, temperate. One of the attributes that God wants or requires of pastors, I should say, to exhibit is the character of being sober. Now, God's not talking about a man avoiding being drunk, though men of God should never drink alcohol at any at all. Neither should any believer, by the way. But can I tell you this, what God is saying? God is speaking more to the pastor's character to take his position seriously because of who he represents. The purpose of God's requirement for the pastor was not about so much the pastor living right and the church people living differently. That's what it was about. See, God gave these requirements so that the believers had a role model. And this is important right here. God wanted them to have a role model and an example of how they should live. You see, the command for the pastor to be sober is God's command to the believer as well to be sober. God gives the believer a man of God to be the example. He's not to be different from his people. He will be, but he's not to be different for the sake of difference. He's to be different and be sober because he's to be the example for the believer to be able to know how to live their life. So this command to the pastor to be sober, it means several things. First, to be sober means to be serious. So there's nothing wrong with telling jokes and everything and enjoying life. But the believer needs to be serious about serving God. Serving God, it's not a joke. There are souls headed for hell. Too many are playing their lives away instead of reaching the lost for Jesus Christ. We've got to be serious about what we do for Christ because souls are at stake and lives hang in the balance based on what we are doing. If we're not serious about serving the Lord, neither will those we lead be serious about serving God. Second, to be sober means to be thoughtful. Being thoughtful means to think before you act. The pastor should certainly not be quick to react to everything that he hears. The pastor instead should move slowly and methodically through the process of making a decision on how to act. Likewise, the believer ought to be sober about their decisions. Being thoughtful about every action is critical to avoiding making decisions that will harm our ability to influence others for Jesus Christ. So before you make decisions, you'd be wise to think about the decisions, be sober, think about it so that you don't make harmful decisions. Third, to be sober means to be level-headed. There's something about having common sense that seems to have left this generation. Common sense comes from the ability to look at a situation and to see the obvious. It's amazing how so few people seem to have common sense anymore. We used to call it horse sense back when I was a kid, but common sense. It tells you sometimes you don't need to say what you want to say. Being level-headed tells you what you may not need, that you may not need to act on something at the moment. Common sense, being level-headed, allows you to see through what is being said and the present circumstance by looking at the results of the action being done to discern what is right and what is wrong. Now, there is no doubt that this generation could use people who are sober or level headed in their decisions, their actions, and in what they say. Fourth, to be sober means to be restrained. Now, you will hurt many people if you don't have the character to restrain yourself every time you want to do something. You got to learn to be sober, which will cause you to realize there are times when you ought not to say what you want because the timing is wrong. Being sober is the character to be calm in stormy times. Being sober is the character to be level-headed in heated circumstances. It's practicing restraint. If you got to practice restraint if you're going to lead people in the right way. When they're out of control, you've got to be in control. Now, my friend, God says to be sober. He commands the preacher, you be sober. But why? So that the believer would know. What does that mean? Be serious. What does that mean? Be thoughtful about your decision. What does that mean? Be level-headed. What does that mean? Be restrained. If we learn to be sober in our Christian life, having that ability just to kind of stay calm in the stormy waves. My friend, if we can just be that sober so we know what to do in the right time, we could influence more people for right, which will really be a great help to the cause of Christ. So I hope that if you're struggling in this area, you start working on this area, being sober. My mom used to always tell me, son, this isn't a circus. You're not a clown. So let's get serious about it. I say to you, this is not a circus, not a playground. This is life. It's a war. Let's act like it. Let's live like it. Let's be serious. Let's be sober. Why? Because we need God's people to be sober minded because there's a hell that is grabbing souls every minute, and we've got to do everything we can to stop those souls from going to hell. Our testimony will say a lot. How we act and how we react, people will determine whether to listen to us or not by that. So let's be sober with all that we do. Well, hope this is a help and an encouragement to you today. Now let's remember today, be good to